Phil, can you just check if it's live on VANSA? And if someone can check if it's live on YouTube.
It's live on Facebook.
It is live on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube? Oh, I was on Facebook. Thank you.
It's live on.
Is it live on YouTube?
It looks like it's live on both.
Oh yeah, it's live on YouTube. It's just lagging behind on YouTube.
Okay, great. So let's start then.
Oh yeah, it's live on YouTube. It's just lagging behind on YouTube.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there normally is like a 15-second delay to YouTube. So let's. Okay, so Leona, if you can mute the YouTube, because I can still hear it in the background.
Yeah, I'll just log off the Zoom as well.
Okay, and Tokoloko has joined us too. Where's Leona gone?
She said she's gonna log off on Zoom and watch on.
Okay, come on.
Hi.
Okay, cool. I think we're ready to go.
Yes, yes. Well, welcome. And it's super exciting to have everyone here. My name is Rufilo Nkomo. I'm from the Visual Arts Network of South Africa. And we're super excited about this gathering, this 24-hour pageant that is in partnership with Greatmore Studio and Art Meets. In case for you who don't know us, VANSA operates as a support point and a development agency for contemporary art practice in South Africa. We develop industry knowledge, resources, networks, and projects that are concerned with realizing new social, cultural, and economic possibilities for contemporary art practice in South Africa and the wider African context. We're incredibly honored and blessed to be able to host this today. And we're really looking forward to all of the insights over the next 24 hours. So you can check this out on VANSA's Facebook page, which is hopefully where you're streaming this from, or on Art Meets YouTube page. So either of those two spaces, you can go and check it out. Keep on coming in throughout the 24 hours just to see what's happening. And yeah, I'm going to hand over to Michaela and the rest of the team. And thank you once again, Michaela, Okona, Otelwa, Tammy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rigowe.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome to the 24-hour pageant. I'm Michaela Limberis from Art Meets, and I'm joined here by most of our team, as well as Okona from Greatmore, and thank you to VANSA and Rufilwe and Tokoloko from VANSA for supporting and hosting the event. The 24-hour pageant comes as a result of thinking through the COVID-19 tornado and this question of essential work in our pandemic economy. A recent public survey in the Singapore Sunday Times listed artists as the least essential workers, with 71% of the vote, which in our discussions, Okona ended up describing as pageantry, this idea of distinguishing one person's work as more essential than another. And that led to the attitude behind the question we posed today about what constitutes essential work, looking at it in context of the arts, and what does it look like in different places for different people. So the sudden rush towards digital content creation also globally saw artists and galleries frantically engaging in Instagram lives and Zoom panels endlessly, And yet another day of watching countless talks on YouTube and Zoom. We were talking about kind of how we could maybe come up with a format and questions that were less prescriptive and predictable. So looking at how our networks form and where they lead, would people ever stop talking if they didn't have a time limit? And what is the barrier to entry? So considering both of these aspects, Art Meets Greatmore Studios and VANSA have created this virtual pageant to collectively inspect the idea of essential work more closely through a 24-hour conversational tag. So the way it will work is that we will nominate speakers to come into the conversation, and in turn, when they leave, they will nominate someone to take their place, either someone they've decided beforehand or just whatever the conversation prompts. So it's a very kind of organic and unpredictable experimental process. So it also demonstrates the plurality that exists and how parallel narratives are always in motion simultaneously. So thank you to everyone for being here, and this is where we will kick off and everyone can kind of have the chance to introduce themselves. We've asked 3 key questions for people to answer, which is just who they are, what they do, and whether they would encourage other younger generations or people to assume similar roles to theirs. So yeah, Kona, if you want to kick off from there.
Sure. My name is Ukona Nzali Mlandu. I'm the director of Greatmore Studios. I'm also an artist, and I'm also somebody who's just trying to make it beyond the pandemic in one piece. And as I sit here, I'm extremely exhausted by the pageantry of always having to perform, that I kind of have an idea where things are going, or that what I do is worth me making it to the other side of this. Yeah, just a bit about Greatmore. It's an old organization. Most kind of know about it. One of the offers is subsidized studio spaces to artists, but also embedded in that is a sense of community and a sense of kind of a space where artists are able to kind of have a kind of a community where they can, peer learning can happen, and also just space away from the demands of the industry and the market, to just explore and kind of come to terms and work through their own artistic process and artistic practice. Yeah, and obviously the events kind of play a role in bringing different people of the industry together, the collectors, the people who are interested in the arts, the supporters of the artists, etc. So, you know, when we can meet, we're able to kind of bring together a very interesting mix of people into one space. And the common interest is obviously artistic expression and what that contributes to society. So would I encourage somebody to do what I do? I don't know, hey, considering that what has kept society sane in these times is art, I think we can all contend with the fact that, you know, pageantry aside, there's a role for the arts in society, because without it, we would have all lost our minds by now. The Netflix that you're watching, the exhausting, you know, yeah, the music concerts, that's all people who are in the arts kind of giving you a place to kind of, a sense of respite from the mundane nature of our existence in these times. And as far as like being responsible for a space that kind of centers the integrity of artistic expression and supporting that process. I mean, if we go back to that study that that claims that artists are kind of, well, it's a study, the numbers in that particular area. Like this perception, if we go back to this perception, then that people have that the arts are not necessarily essential, then spaces such as Greatmore and other platforms that recognize this become even more critical, I think. Yeah, I'll stop there for now.
I'm going to jump in since everyone went quiet for a second. My name is Tammy Langtree, and I guess my title is curator. But it took a long time to accept that title. I would always just tell people I work in the arts because I think, or I motivate that a curator is something like a Swiss Army knife, that it has multiple functions and multiple purposes, and it's handy for so many things. So you have to have all these skills under your belt to be able to function and like plug into, you know, organizations, plug into artists' practice, plug into funding bodies, plug into all these different spaces and be able to work through and be a glue sometimes. So it took me a long time to accept the title of curator, but I'm currently working at an institution called Zeitz-Mocha, and also working with Michaela, Thor, Precious, Michael at Art Meets and many others. And I guess for me, the second question, which is, how is your work essential, was a challenging and very personal question, because there was a point during COVID, during the lockdown, where I was like, I feel so non-essential, I feel sidelined, I feel like, you know, I'm not sure how to use my skills or bring my skills to the fore, to imagine or grow or think about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So yeah, it's a hard question to try and answer. And I know Michaela asked this question a while ago, and she said, if we're going to ask other people to answer this, we need to answer this question. And I fumbled through words, you have no idea. It was so awkward. But I guess to answer the second question, or the third question, sorry, which is, would you encourage others to join you in your role? I think absolutely. And I want to read something quickly, which for me maybe helps us think about what I think maybe helps define my role, but also what for me I'm going to be listening for throughout the 24 hours and trying to gather and think through. And this is a text by James Baldwin, and it's called The Creative Process. I'm going to read one pre-sentence. The artist is present to correct the delusions to which we fall prey in our attempts to avoid this knowledge. It is for this reason that all societies have battled with the incorrigible disturber of the peace, the artist. I doubt that future societies will get on with them any better. The entire purpose of society is to create a bulwark against the inner and the outer chaos in order to mark life bearable and to keep the human race alive. It is absolutely inevitable that when a tradition has been evolved, whatever the tradition is, the people in general will suppose it to have existed from before the beginning of time and will be most unwilling and indeed unable to conceive of any changes in it. They do not know how they will live without those traditions that have given them their identity. The reaction when it is suggested that they can or that they must is panic. And we see this panic, I think, everywhere in the world today, from the streets of New Orleans to the grisly battleground of Algeria. And a higher level of consciousness among the people is the only hope we have now or in the future of minimizing human damage. And I think for me, when I think about essential work, I don't just think about those that have been asked to be on the front lines of COVID or the pandemic or the lockdown changes. But essential work as emotional labor, psychological labor, spiritual labor. What are all these other kinds of labor that has to happen and that is happening that we've not, I mean, for necessary reasons, monetized? or in some instances have tried to. I mean, psychologists exist, spiritual healers exist, some of these people exist but then how do we think about art within those realms? So yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about work and working, and I think it's a fundamental question we've been asked is, do we define work by the capitalist system we're all working in? Do we define work by the necessary needs of humans and society around us? How do we define that work? And is there definitive or a way that we could link our understandings of it and come to some, not agreement, but come to some acknowledgement of it? So for me, that's some of the stuff that I'm listening for during the 24 hours. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I also just want to add, because I don't know if Michaela mentioned it, this is more practical or logistical, that, you know, each of us as nominees will nominate a next person. And so this network is going to grow, and I'm excited to see who everyone else is nominated and how they nominate the next person and the next person. And if there can be continuity in those links of networks, if our networks all think the same, if they think differently, I'm really excited for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also if there are people who are watching, I mean, they can send their questions via the chat box. I think on YouTube as well, we're allowed to send those questions. So we'll be interacting with our speakers. Yes, Tammy?
I got a WhatsApp already from someone saying they want in. They're watching live and they want in. So if anyone's nominee drops out, Poka is here, he's there.
Perfect. Love it.
I'm sure we can patch people in as we're talking. I think after the intro, we could just start patching people in, and then the conversation then becomes more meatier. Anyway, my name is Gokelwa. You wanted to say something?
I was just going to say that the format is kind of indicative of the way the industry operates, and, like, you know, the decision to not kind of maintain hosting capability or be moderated by a single person was a choice to kind of open up and see what happens when there isn't this kind of hierarchical structure. And also looking at nepotism, who talks for the longest, who dominates the space. There's like all these questions that play into it over the 24 hours, and it is very fluid. So it's not exactly like we can predict anything. So it's kind of like a research experiment in a way as well.
So what do we do with the people who are already calling in?
Admit them. You want to admit them already? It's your.
Yeah. What do you think? Not? Two people are already calling in. Should we patch them in, or we should? I think let's. Why not?
All right. So who's your nominee?
Yeah. If they're interested in being part of this now, like maybe this is the time that they have, and to say not now is also to kind of.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Let's kind of relinquish that.
Yeah. Okay, so it's already. Okay, so we've got Usha.
We've got Sub-Zahara joining us.
Yeah, do you want to just introduce because you nominated?
I think because I haven't introduced myself, she can do that. I want her to do that actually. Is she? Okay. Oh, there she is. I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Gokelwa Mashika. Ooh, what do I do? It's a complicated one. I'm a curator, and like Tammy, I find the title curator very limiting. It does not encompass really what I'm doing. I think I'm also a scholar, especially visual studies or photography to be specific. What's the question? Is what I'm doing essential? Whew, it's a complicated one. I mean, it's something that it's not easy to answer. but hopefully as we go on this conversation, I'll be able to find some words to articulate what essential means to me. And I remember just thinking about it because it's a conversation we've been having from the beginning of the lockdown. And I was like, it's so strange how the hierarchy has kind of been flipped. The people that we will
I think, Kogelo, you're frozen there.
Because I cannot show. Okay, what did I say?
So I think we're having network issues. Is everyone else not frozen?
Yeah, I think we've lost Kogelo, so maybe somebody else was.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Jacobs. I am an analog collage artist as well as a museum professional. And recently I've just had the pleasure and real honor of working with amazing minds that are part of the Art Meets team. So I'm quite excited to be here. The topic at hand is quite a complicated one, as everyone's mentioned. I think for somebody that is both, has to think like an artist, and for somebody that works as a professional at a museum institution, it becomes quite an interesting experience watching what gets constituted as essential, depending on who's speaking. And I think that COVID has really, I think Kogelo mentioned it, I mean, this pandemic has turned the entire scene upside down, has flipped the script, passed this script to that person and that script to the next person. And I think what stands out the most for me, and what I'm really, really interested in hearing, and I'm hoping that it comes out of this conversation, is how do we constitute what is essential? Because and I'm also having to own my privilege in this conversation as somebody that works at the institution that I work at and that has access to things like Wi-Fi and access to spaces where I can view this art that we are all trying to defend. I've been hearing a lot of conversations around why it is important that the arts continue. And the one thing that I'm consistently hearing is this framing of artists and that output as something that is ephemeral, as something that is always there or used to motivate. And not to say that motivation is not important, but in the systems that we exist in the systems that the art world exists in, there needs to be a formalization of this practice. And you often find that it becomes the institution that formalizes or takes the ability of the artist to formalize practice in terms of economy and uses it themselves. I'm really interested in hearing how people that are in this industry are navigating that process.
Good, do you want to try again with your intro? Because we lost you for a sec, you froze, so we missed quite a bit. You're on mute, eh?
Sabaza, because she's
yeah, but I was just thinking about systems of legitimizing something as essential. For me, that was quite, what are the systems that that are in place, basically, whether politically, whether economically, that kind of legitimize something as essential, right? And I was just thinking about South Africa. Being South African is such a challenging thing, you know, because I was thinking of, again, within the concept of essential, there's this master service complex that's happening. This, like I said, that people that we will normally ignore, the people that, you know, the people that come and pick up our garbage, the people that clean our streets, the people that service when we go to supermarkets. Now these are the people that the forefront was helping to serve us. But there was also this notion of this master servant complex that I feel like it just continually being perpetuated within the systems that have been placed by the government, you know, as a way of combating, I suppose, as a way of preventing, I mean, the pandemic. But yeah, so that was kind of, for me, essential is quite deep. It's very embedded in our South African politics, you know, where we are as a country emotionally, psychologically, and obviously economically, you know, where we are. What was the other question? I'm sorry. Would I let the next generation perhaps be in our, or do what I do? It's a hard one because I feel like even to do what we're doing, it's a very, there's a special thing inside of us that has made us to be, you know, to be in this sector for the longest time. Yes, if they are interested, yes, you know, again, it's an option that I would like to be available, especially from primary, you know, if kids would know that there's this sector, because even from schools, art is not something that has been focused on. So yeah, I'll just end there. And I've got a friend of mine, Sub Zahara, who's just joined us. You are more than welcome to come in and introduce yourself and yeah, and just also contribute to the conversation. Should we?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Special greetings to all the powerful and beautiful creatives. I am literally in between a car and a beachfront, so I just came and ran into the back of the car now, so that at least you could hear me, because there's like a lot of wave sounds of the waves and the seagulls and all of that. So you know, I was assuming you might not pick up on my voice unless I, you know, sort of, yeah. So I think that's art too, huh? Moving art in motion. I don't really know what to say, but I mean, I know some of you already. I have been working within the creative and cultural sector for quite a long time. And my speciality at the moment is creative and cultural sector communications and project management. And I've just accepted, you know, I've been running my business, which is Honeybush Communications, after a stint at the African Arts Institute as per the communications manager. And I've worked on various different projects in different countries, in South Africa itself. And now I've just taken up a new position again for the first time in like probably 5 years, because I've just been freelancing, you know, ever since that position. And now I'm actually working in broadcasting. And so for me, my passion at the moment, really, you know, with my heart being in the arts, being in the creative and cultural sector, is pretty much connected to what we're doing here. But I'm looking at how can we get the voices of creatives, you know, within the fourth industrial revolution, you know, which we basically thrusted into by force. How can we get, you know, the creative sector speaking in a way that is technologically savvy, but also taking into consideration some of the things like state surveillance, international surveillance, how do we sort of navigate between wanting to be, technologically relevant and plugged in, but at the same time, all of our conversations being recorded, everything that we do being monitored, laws and things like a policy being launched at the moment for comment by the Communications Minister of South Africa, where we are actually going to possibly get to a point, unless people raise activism, where we're not going to be able to just post everything all the time. So what is that digital space? What are the ethics, that need to be maintained within that digital space for creatives moving forward? So that's basically, how is our intellectual property going to be protected? We've always had issues of intellectual property, not being protected in our waking, living lives on this earth and on this planet as creatives. But how does the digital realm, bring a whole new level of challenges? How are we going to face artificial intelligence, which wants to replace the creative with the robot? So all of these things, those are the things that I'm, interested in exploring, and very excited about this platform. And yeah, let me leave it there. I do talk a lot. So let me leave it there before I take over the conversation. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I'm here, I'm with you.
Thank you.
I'll jump in quickly. Hi guys, Precious and Hone here. I'm ish like Go and Tammy said, hey, this problem of kind of defining or describing yourself and what you do. But I guess I would say I'm a curator, whatever that means, a researcher, and an artist. So I'm based in Malawi. And yeah, are we essential workers? Is what we do essential? In the context of where I am now, and depending on who I asked, I think people would say no, right? Because unlike the landscape of South Africa, we don't have the ecosystem of your galleries, the big five, as they'd call them, smaller ones, your museums. And art isn't taught in schools, right? But if you ask me, it's essential. I think Okonda mentioned how, you have the music concerts, you have the entertainment that exists online that artists are producing, and that's what's kept us going in the pandemic, is being able to kind of have these mental safe spaces to kind of, escape the kind of madness that has been this pandemic and the pressure of this pandemic and the isolation that the pandemic has created. So I think that's something I'm always kind of struggling with, because when like I said, back in this context, who has access to the internet to even go on Instagram Live and watch your favorite musician have a live concert, or go to a webinar and listen to your peers say things that kind of fill your cup, and so I'm trying to figure out art as a whole, not just my role. I mean, I personally think it is essential work, but when you exist in a space that doesn't even consider it that, but more of a privilege, how are you trying to convey or understand that it's essential to life? It's essential to a well-rounded human. It's a form of expression. It's a form of self. And so that leads me to the whole, would I encourage younger people? Oh, absolutely. That would be goals for me, would just be to encourage as many young people as possible to tap into that part of themselves and think of it as being essential. But I'm curious to see, as more people kind of come into the conversation, that perspective of, I guess, how are we understanding it for ourselves as being essential, in what way? And people who aren't in this world, are we trying to convince them that it is essential? Are we trying to convince them that we're essential? And how do those dynamics work? Because I think actually that article, Michaela, that you mentioned, the Singapore Times article, someone tweeted it, I think from the New York Times, and said it took an artist to make the images that show you what an artist looks like, what a doctor looks like. Because someone had to draw or illustrate the graphic of a doctor, the graphic of an artist. I think one of them was like telemarketer, da, da, da. So it's essential because that article needed someone to make visuals for you to even make that point. So I thought that was really interesting as well. but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Looking forward to more chats.
So can I just say something? So for me, part of the ridiculousness of it all is the idea that we should be competing to convince anyone that anybody's chosen life work is essential or not. So I think as a humanity, we're still missing the point. We're still missing the point if we are still producing articles that are based on the hierarchy of lives, right? And it speaks to bigger social and political concerns that become evident, that play out as a result of this kind of thinking, right? And so for me, part of it is maybe tapping out of this idea that we need to prove ourselves, which is why the title pageantry, the ridiculousness of it, like at some point because if you think about it, there are industries that are dying as we speak. So life as we knew it is no longer something that we can hold on to. So in that space, if I'm watching, like my observation tells me that the people who are more likely to survive are the people who can't describe what they do. And I see, and I'm pained to see all of us trying to find the right words and the right definitions and the right boxes and the right categories to describe this thing that we are drawn to. And I'm going, but a lot of the definitions have evaporated. So perhaps we right now, it feels like, because we are still using this lens of hierarchy, it feels like we don't have a place. But my bet is that as we try and make sense of this new reality, it's going to be the people who can shapeshift, like Tammy described it. It's going to be the people who can shapeshift who are going to have the imagination. Because here's one thing that we've invested in this peculiar thing of ours that we don't know how to name, is that we have fought systems and societies that are organized to kill the imagination. And we've actively invested and believed, and some of our families are not proud of what we do, but something in us insists that there's something to be said for the space where you fight for imagination. Yeah.
I suppose I'm also thinking about the question that Temi had raised about, defining what we're doing outside the capitalist system. I'm like, how do we even begin to do that? I suppose imagination comes into play. Imagining a world without, a capitalist system basically at play, and we define our own. But then again, for me, there is this notion of legitimacy, of kind of legitimizing what we do, which is, it's very parallel to a capitalist way of thinking as well, And you're right, we're not supposed to be here and trying to to give this thing a name, or to even convince people that what we're doing is essential. But I don't know, I'm just like, I feel like we are in this vacuum of, because things are defined, they have a name, they have a title. So therefore we also have to follow, that. But I was also thinking about our government as well, like I don't know if it should be a question of how do we convince them, not convince, that's such a terrible word, but like, how do we bring them to be aware of the issues that we're dealing with, So yeah, I'm just gonna let it.
I think it's, and maybe what I'm gonna say is a bit, I'm gonna challenge a bit. I think You know, we are shying away from using words to articulate an experience in a particular sector that exists in a specific system. The art industry doesn't exist in a system outside of an economic system. The economic system by nature is competitive. So for us to legitimize, formalize, and survive, we have to be able to name how we show up. We've got to name it, what is it called, and how it shows up. Where it becomes interesting is that you have all these players, at least, you know, listening to various conversations, reading articles, watching the news, and working, essentially. You see that there are many people that are, you know, wanting a piece of this pie, wanting this essentialism that is described. And I wonder if, you know, in our own, because I had to ask myself that, like, what essential to what, Michael? You want to be seen? You want to be seen? You want to be essential to what? Because at the same time, the fight I'm fighting, right, to be essential, I cannot fight without a huge institution benefiting from it. And in most cases, it always is the case. We had a huge, you know, uprising with the Black Lives Matter movement that rose up, and you know, you started noticing on social media that the voice was saying that institutions need to say something, and then we saw a trend of institutions acknowledging, apologizing, and in some instances denying, and then now you're starting to see the same thing being utilized to market and to sell. And so at some point you're punching and you're kicking, but who are you punching and you're kicking for survival? And who gets to survive? So I agree. Well, I don't agree. I think, yes, I am interested in finding out what would actually happen if we didn't use the same systems to remedy the system that we are that we are talking about right now. I don't know if that makes sense. And I mean, you know, yeah.
I don't want to answer on that because I can just do that gospel, you know, heard you. But I did want to just mention that my nominee, Usha Sidram, is in the room. And I don't know if I need to do a formal invitation, you know, acknowledgement of her in the room, but to say that, Usha, if you want to step in, you're in the chat also. Step in, Usha. And I'll just to do something a little bit formal to say Usha's here. Usha's my nominee. And from her, I hope when your next person comes in, you can at least acknowledge them and invite them into the room a little bit. I won't give you titles or acknowledgements, but I will say that I know Usha from working in Johannesburg, not exactly at the bag factory, but I think that's where I got to know your practice a little bit more, and we were able to have more intimate conversations about life and art and all of these things. But thank you for accepting the nomination and for your participation and your time. Yeah.
Thanks, Tammy. I find this whole format quite interesting. I love the idea of this continuous role and how the conversation will be repetitive and new layers and taking it further and coming back. I'm quite excited by that. I was also really interested in the fact that it's called a pageant. So this morning I looked up the meaning of the word pageant, and pageant means like a procession or some kind of display, but also the association that we have with the pageant is like a beauty pageant. And in the dictionary, it had American in brackets, that it's the American notion of pageant that is associated with like a beauty pageant. And I just thought that's so interesting in the context of what's happening right now, that you've chose to call this a pageant. To answer some of the questions, the first question asks, who am I? Who are you? And that's such a broad question because the tendency is to start rattling off your CV and what your accomplishments are and what your achievements are. But it's like the existential question, right? Who are you? And right now the word who, like if I see the word who, I think of the World Health Organization. I saw a meme that said for the first time, the question and the answer has the same, like who is the question and who is also the answer. So who takes on a whole new meaning. And I think to answer that for myself right now, who am I has got to do with being part of the problem and being part of the solution, in that I'm connecting with who I am as a human being and who I am as a species on this planet that is so aware of our collective connectedness. And by our, I just mean as a species, but also our connectedness to the earth. The whole reason why we are in this predicament is because we, as a race, as a species, we've seen ourselves as separate to the earth. We talk about nature and us, and we don't acknowledge that we are part of nature. And the more we insist on our separateness, the more we fuck it all up. And the more we accept that we are part of this, which is going back to indigenous knowledge, it's going back to a intuition, it's going back to a naturalness, which is there, it's innate, it's who we are. But we keep denying this because we've bought into all kinds of, yes, and they are Western notions of how to be in this world and how to navigate what we do here. I don't know, I'm bringing another angle into who am I? Shall I answer the other questions?
Yeah, sure.
This second question spoke about essential, right? And when we got out of level 5 lockdown and we were going into level 4 lockdown, I went to the police station to try get a permit to work at my studio, which is not far away from home. And I had planned to work there alone, just so that I can start making work again. And when I went to the police station trying to get a permit, they asked me what it is that I do. And I explained that I'm an artist. This is my studio. This is where I work from. There will not be anybody else there. So I won't be in contact with anybody and I'll work alone. And then they said, what does the studio look like? So I said, it's a bit like a workshop. There's tools and so on. And then they didn't give me a permit because they said, you're not an essential service. And this hit me right in the gut because I thought, but I am. I am an essential service. What I do is essential to our community. It's essential to my own sense of sanity. Because suddenly I started thinking about the idea of creativity. Is creativity essential? Is the ability to express oneself essential? Is like the role of art, how essential is that? And the fact that he said, you're not an essential service, started me thinking around the value of art and how we have to fight for this value all the time. Somebody, I think Precious, it was you that spoke about the lack of education, the lack of art education. We have to constantly fight to convince the world about the value of art. It's only the converted who understand how essential it is. Everybody sees it as a non-essential, including our education system, including, it's like the small group of people who understand this language and everybody else needs to learn this new language. So that was my response to essential. And your last question was about, would I encourage the next generation to be an artist? And again, it's not a straightforward answer. The obvious answer is, of course, because I've just now spoken about the value of art, and how could you not encourage the next generation if you're placing value on what it is that we do, and stating that the rest of the world doesn't see this value. But I have 2 children, and I would be a bit cautious about pushing them in this field, because I know how hard it is to be an artist. So while there's value placed on, it's not just creativity, it's the ability to express, it's to be critical thinkers, and that's the broad, not even sector, it's the broad, like who it is that you are, right? Obviously, that's what we want to encourage. But I think of friends who are theater actors right now. And I mean, even outside of COVID, it's so hard to be that, especially in South Africa. It's so hard to be an artist. We tread constantly this fine line between how commercial do I want to go, and how much do I want to maintain my conceptual identity, and how do I make a living? So unless, I think it's our kind of responsibility as a sector to build that, so that we can encourage the next generation to come into this world with confidence and with support. So our responsibility is to build that support so that we can make it a bit easier for them. And that's not easy. Of course, the answer to that is systemic, right? And it goes beyond the converted, that we have to grow the industry. We have to grow the support for the industry. So the short answer is yes, but. Yes, but.
I always wonder, because I guess in my professional development, I had to make choices about what kind of professional I want to be, not just in the arts, but just generally, like what profession do you choose? How do you show up in that industry? Blah, blah, blah. And then I think at some point I had to make a decision between studying 2 different things. And then even when I started working, I had to decide between different like tracks that I could go in terms of showing up. And I guess the only thing that I could make peace with was to ask the question, what kind of hard do you want to sit with? Like, is it the hard where every day going to your job is emotionally and psychologically hard? Like you have to change yourself and adapt the criticality you explained and the ideas of expression and creativity, like adapt those things to a different environment and just put your suit on every day and like, you know, versus a different kind of hard, which is like grinding in a different kind of way that is about using your creativity, using your inventiveness, using all of those things to try and piece together what you think this thing could be or what you think it does. But I guess that for me was the thing of like, what kind of hard do you want to deal with? Because no one in my family are in the art industry. So I didn't have anybody to say, go this direction or do this or try that or figure this out. And
there's something to be said about following your heart. I know you use the word hard. What kind of hard do you want it to be? But when you are passionate about what you do and you love what you do, that hard is okay. I mean, I think I'm one of the hardest working people on the planet. I work incredibly hard and I push, but I want to push. And I see people in soul draining jobs that are tied to it because of security, because of the need to have an income. And I feel so fortunate to be able to do what I love. Yes, it's hard and it's not sustainable and there's ups and downs and there's no kind of regularity and you've got to push. But imagine the opposite of that, where there's no interest, there's no excitement, there's no passion, there's no love for it. And if the next, I mean, I get a lot of young students coming to ask me, like at school level, should I pursue a career in arts? I have a lot of parents coming and saying, how hard is it? Should we encourage our kids to take this up? And I give them a balanced view. I say, it's incredibly hard, but how can you deny them this? They have to be given a chance. How can you stop somebody from being who they are? If who you are is to, you have it's a gift, it's a talent. And we have to acknowledge that, and we have to embrace it, and we have to support the person to grow that. Yeah, we can't do otherwise, isn't it?
Okay, so I'm just gonna jump in there to invite my nominee into the conversation, and then I'm gonna tap out. So Kim is here from Mauritius, and he runs La Case d'Art, and we met through a workshop with the British Council for Connect Hubs, and a lot of the work they do is actually trying to kind of look at what the creative economy is, what constitutes it, and how you can measure its impact and its value, and how policymakers are recognizing that you can't look at art separate from social and cultural impact. So yeah, that's just how we met, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and answer the questions, and then all our nominees can start their own conversation, yeah, amongst yourselves.
I'm also going to introduce Lindsay Samuels. She's a friend of mine. And Lindsay, are you listening? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So thanks, guys, for being part of this, and hope you get along. Bye.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.
Is this the moment I start speaking? So I think this is an amazing idea, what Art Meets VANSA and Greatmore has put together. So I went to bed early last night, and I thought, I have to get up early. I've got this thing that I'm doing tomorrow. Can't do what I normally do and wake up like really late. And I couldn't fall asleep because obviously my mind was just like buzzing with what this could become potentially, what I might say, what I shouldn't say, because I don't want to be shot and killed in the future. So I'm going to try and manage myself. Like Sabah, I'm very much into conspiracies, but I don't necessarily watch conspiracies and jump on it and then that's what I do. I develop, they formulate themselves in my mind because I see patterns, and I'm able to, it's just, I've always been very observant. I've been, as a child, I was quite quiet and soft. I didn't interact and engage much. So what I did was I watched a lot of social cues and I formulated patterns, and so that's a skill that I have, and I think it's really useful in the arts. And then also I'm going to try not to stay on for the whole 24 hours because my brain might explode with all the conversations and ideas and things. I think the one thing that's like really sticking out at me right now is one, what Sabah Zahada said. She was in fact my initial tag. So I won't be tagging anybody when I leave. But I don't want to get too involved in the conspiracies of the digital realm or where we find ourselves in terms of the art world right now. But I think one of the things that, and Michael also touched on it briefly, I think Usha and Tammy also touched on it. So to bring it into a commercial conversation, my name is Lindsay. I work as a gallery manager, my 9 to 5. I'm also on the committee of a very old gallery. It's as old as the AVA. It's also an association in Belleville but they've lost a lot of traction over the years just because I think of where they are situated. And the art industry just being absolutely vibrant in the city of Cape Town, and nobody really wants to be in the northern suburbs. The gallery that I work at is also in the northern suburbs, and it happens to be on a wine farm. So if you imagine essential work being, or what is deemed essential work being closed for people to access, I am now part of that as an art gallery inside a wine farm. And people are not allowed to do that at the moment as well. So we can't open. If every gallery in the city opens, we can't open. We have to wait until hospitality as an industry opens. And then also being where, so I'm not originally from Cape Town, I'm from Johannesburg. I studied art. I didn't study art. I did art in high school. When I moved to Cape Town, I realized that I was robbed of an art education based on the syllabus that was delivered in Johannesburg versus what art students got in Cape Town. And then also I feel like the home of the creative industry is still Cape Town. As much as Johannesburg is thriving and booming, and it's a very commercial space, I believe, I don't think that the soul of South African art exists the same as what it does. I'm not saying better or worse, I'm just saying the same as what it does in the city of Cape Town. And I think people are just naturally creative in Cape Town. When I moved to Cape Town about 15 years ago, I lived with a friend who worked for a child rehabilitation center. I don't want to give too much information, but she came home one day. Everybody's always known I've been creative and I've been into the arts. And she came home one day and she said, you know, I'm busy working with this child who's been arrested and I'm really upset. I thought I just need to share the story with you. Because he would go into wealthy people's houses and steal paintings. But the way he was caught is that the owner had walked past the painting and smelled the wet paint, because he would forge the paintings and then steal the original. And that is how amazing of an artist he was. While she was working with him, he told her that he would always doodle in his school books and teachers would walk by and rip the pages out of the books and say, you must do what we are teaching you. You can't be drawing your own things. And I think that's part of I want to link that story, and I think I heard that story about 10 years ago, to where we are now. So one of the most interesting things I experienced at this year's art fair, the Cape Town Art Fair, I think it was, the energy was very intense. I think most of us who attended the art fair can attest to how just it felt, to me, it felt like a dogfight. That energy that you would experience when you're walking into a space of people just competing, or a hunger fest. I don't know what that actually feels like because I've never actually engaged in one of those spaces, but that's what I imagined it. I've always imagined it to feel like what the art fair felt like. And a lot of people that had gone on different days who I bumped into said, I just need to get out because it's just so intense. And for about 5 years, I've been saying African art is a commodity. African art is a commodity. It's becoming popular. And people were like, yeah, no, it's not, it's not, it's not. And then when the mainstream newspapers started saying it, I just kept quiet. And in terms of the art fair, I thought it quite interesting, but not because I saw the pattern that Chenery was at the art fair and they had a booth at the art fair. But what their booth consisted of was a bunch of pages and pens, etc., and a little competition sheet for an artist to enter a competition, and their work would then become a product in Chenery. The artist, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. They targeted emerging artists in the little blurb that they put out, or the spiel, I think that's how you pronounce the word. And the artist that had been successful for that competition, I believe, was Banele Khoza. I love Banele. I don't have anything against him. But what Chenery had said they are wanting to do with the competition and what they did do were two different things. And I think this is one of the conversations that the commercial industry needs to start owning, is that innovative thinking, being creative, the arts, i.e., if we look at all the musical concerts, Game has got a Game Stores, who happens to be owned by Massmart, who is also the holding company for Walmart. They have had a series of musical concerts. Vodacom has had a series of, I believe it's comedy shows. Trinity, so they can't exist without the creative industry in this period that we are in today. But the conversation is, how is the artist benefiting if we are still being deemed non-essential? Yet the mainstream commercial industry cannot survive without us right now. And then it's also the thinking of the artists that are behind things like Bitcoin. It's an innovative, creative methodology that is only nurtured through creativity. Things like software design, all of those spaces are also creative. And Usha did touch on it, but I think that we need to also look into how the commercial industry feeds off the arts and the creative industry in order for them to survive. Yet the root of it all is us, but we are looked at as the non-essential part of the equation. So if we remove ourselves from the equation, what does the rest of the world actually look like right now? And it's a space of deep contention for me, because it's as the feeding is as greedy as I felt it at the art fair in the mainstream world, I feel. And then I think that's the one thing. And then the other thing that I think also I'd love to have unpacked a little bit on this platform is what Michael said, where what are the systems that we can create? We are creatives that are separate from the mainstream industry in order to solve the things that we are wanting to fix. I think when I was an art student, the same friend that was working in rehabilitation had said to me, I understand that you're poor and I understand that you are the poor student, but you are an artist, you are creative, so you just need to figure it out. You need to figure out where you're going to find your materials, you're going to figure out how you're going to fix it, you just need to figure it out. It's part of being an art student. And I think that the onus for all of the things that we are wanting solved within the industry is not government, is not the mainstream world, is not anybody on the outside of the industry, but it's completely and solely on our shoulders. And if we look at the kind of support that the world has given us right now, we need to just accept that they're not going to support us. They're not going to call us essential. They're not going to look at us as essential unless we start owning who we are. And then would I encourage the younger generation? I would love to say yes. And I will actively always do it. Do I believe that? I think it's a very multifaceted question to be asked. I don't think it's a simple yes or no sort of answer. And I don't think it's that for anybody that's going to join us or join this platform. If I have children, will I push them into the arts? Absolutely. I will not keep them away from the arts, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, they will be participating in the creative arts industry because of how it maps one's brain. It creates a space for problem solving in your brain. It creates a space for critical thinking in your brain. It does all of those things. And so, I mean, if we look at the history of our education system, it was created for the, I believe, the Industrial Revolution in order to create workers. But what the world needs today, right now, post-COVID, is not going to be workers. It's going to be innovative thinkers in order to solve problems of the world. And they don't solve problems by you don't solve a problem by going, oh, you know, let me invent something new. You take everything that you've got as your equation and you put in equals and you figure it out. And art teaches you to do that. So yes, I will push every single child. I wish that, I know on VANSA's call out for the pageant, or not the call out, but the marketing, there was the comment of STEAM. And that's also becoming quite popular now. I don't know if anybody knows what STEAM is, but initially it was STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And if you look at something as simple as the color green, how do you get the color green? It's blue and yellow. That essentially is a different version of a sum. 1 + 1 = 2. Green plus yellow blue plus yellow equals green. So I think that is, sorry, I've got my cell phone going off on the other end.